All right, we can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn on LGBTQ plus grief. My name is Dr. Dan Sheridan, and I'll be your presenter today. Before we start today's presentation, I'd like to pass it along to our CEO, Ms. Deborah Alvel-Seger, who'd like to say a quick hello.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining. I am thrilled that you're here and there are more people coming, so we'll see more come. Please, if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, do so. Let us know what agency you're with. We always love to know who's joining us today. I do apologize. My camera is not on because I am driving, which don't drive and go on Zoom. Not doing it safely. So I was double booked, but I had to be here for this as well. This is very important to us and our team, being present for Pride, not just today, not just in the month of June, but all year long. It's very important for each of us to be allies or part of the community, and we know how difficult grieving is for everybody, and especially in the last year in the LGBTQ plus community. We're here to support and to do more and more each day. So thank you, Dr. Sheridan, for putting this together. Again, I apologize, I am not on camera, but I hope to see each of you soon, and I will turn it back to Dr. Sheridan.
Thanks, Deb. So I will be sharing my screen with you all so you can see the presentation I have prepared. Okay, so before we get started, just a couple of things. We're going to cover a lot of information today. We can talk a lot about grief in the LGBTQ plus community. My idea and thinking was to provide you some broad overview, and then I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. I really don't mind being interrupted, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to just shout out if you'd like. If you feel more comfortable writing it in the text box, write your question in the text box, and someone from the team will bring that to my attention. So today's presentation is titled Finding a Safe Space to Grieve, Special Considerations for LGBTQ plus grief. So as you all are aware, the LGBTQ plus community has experienced a significant shift over the past year. An enormous amount of legislation throughout the country, and particularly in Florida, has been aimed towards the LGBTQ plus community, making it a lot less safe, a lot more challenging to live openly, to live authentically, to live freely. And I would also argue to grieve as anyone else should be able to grieve. So we're going to really contextualize so much that has gone on over the past year through the lens of grief, and how these discriminatory, marginalizing legislations, shifts in our culture could impact an LGBTQ plus person's ability to grieve safely in community and intrapersonal within themselves. So this is me. I'm the presenter. I'm the clinical and training advisor for the Children's Bereavement Center. For 4.5 years, I was the clinical director and oversaw all of our programming and training within the nonprofit. Now I've transitioned to an advisory role and work in private practice as a licensed psychologist. To give you an idea of today's overview, what we're going to cover, I'm going to provide a brief introduction about grief and how it impacts the LGBTQ plus community. Then we'll get into a deeper dive of the context of grief within the LGBTQ plus community. We'll talk about the very importance of intersectionality and how it can impact grief. We'll go further into grief related to loss within the LGBTQ plus community. We'll follow that with a further exploration of mental health and coping mechanisms. Then we'll talk about the role of community support, actionable strategies for allies of the LGBTQ plus community, and then we'll finish it off, if we have time, with some case examples to bring it all together and have a little bit of an activity to do together. To start off, I'd just like to provide a poll question. This is a very simple question, completely voluntary. If you don't feel comfortable participating, you do not have to. But just to give us a sense of who's in the room today, the question is, what's your connection to the LGBTQ plus community? Are you a member of the community or are you an ally? So please take a second and respond if you feel comfortable responding. All right, looks like pretty much everyone responded. So let's take a look at what we got. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So we got about 2/3 who are allies and 1/3 who are members of the LGBTQ plus community. So thank you to all of our allies who are joining, and thank you to all the members. It's nice to have a nice mix of people, and it offers some more opportunity for discussion throughout the presentation to share your own unique perspectives as it relates to grief within this community. All right, so diving in to our introduction. So let's just start off with a question of what is grief, to give you guys a better definition. Grief is a complex, multifaceted response to loss, particularly the loss of someone or something that was deeply connected to oneself. And grief can manifest in all sorts of ways: emotionally, physically, cognitively, behaviorally, socially, philosophically. Emotionally is the most noticeable form of grief. That can include feelings of sadness, anger, guilt, and sometimes even relief or happiness, depending on the circumstances of the loss. These emotions can often be overwhelming and can fluctuate over time. You can have good days, you can have bad days, emotional. Grief can also present physically. It can be in physical forms such as fatigue, sleep disturbances, changes in appetite, physical body aches, or even more serious health complications. Cognitively, grief can result in confusion, difficulty concentrating, a preoccupation with the loss or deceased, and even vivid dreams or nightmares about your loved one who died. Behaviorally, grieving individuals may withdraw socially, they may cry frequently, they can engage in behaviors linked to their loss, which can include visiting a loved one's grave or looking at old photos. Socially, grief can impact social relationships. A person may start to feel disconnected from others or might start to have conflicts with friends or families about the loss. Some, on the other hand, might find a sense of community with others who have experienced similar losses, as can happen in a grief support group. Philosophically, grief can raise immense questions, both philosophically and spiritually. People may start to question their beliefs regarding their religion that they grew up in, their relationship with God, the fairness of the world, and try to seek meaning in their experience of loss, which is a very fundamental aspect of grief. How do we find meaning out of this loss? Throughout all of these dimensions, it's very important to note that grief is a very normal response to loss. Grief can present in so many ways, but everything that we talked about so far are normal responses to loss. So if you notice anybody sharing any of these dimensions of grief, it can be very useful to help normalize it for them, to let them know that there's nothing wrong with what they're feeling, what they're thinking, how they're behaving. These are all very normal experiences. At the same time, everyone's grief is unique. We all grieve differently, and that can be shaped by many factors, including one's relationship to the deceased, that they have a happy relationship, close relationship to the person who died, or was it more fraught with conflict? Did they not have a very happy relationship with that person? That's going to affect the way they grieve. Also, their individual coping skills and support system is going to affect their grief presentation, as well as their personal belief system and their cultural background. Keep in mind, when we support a grieving individual, It's like looking into a kaleidoscope. It's always different. Every person's grief is going to look differently, and it can change day to day, hour by hour, week to week. But it often contains varying degrees of these similar elements that we've talked about so far that can shift and change and look differently. But there are shared commonalities that we can all come around to understand, even though our stories, the way we're feeling could be different from person to person. So as we look towards LGBTQ plus grief, the community faces unique societal challenges, which can make the grieving process a lot more complicated and challenging. Particularly, stigma, discrimination, and prejudice can lead to an absence of validation, an absence of empathy and support when these individuals are grieving. So as an example, an LGBTQ plus person may be estranged from their family due to their identity, making the grieving process more complex, since they have to navigate the pain of their loss along with the pain of the estrangement from their family. So it's really a double grief that coincides and can amplify their grieving experience. The fear of discrimination can also deter individuals from seeking help. So that can lead to grief that remains unaddressed. It can lead to isolation, a lack of support, and eventually and potentially increase in mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. So as an example, someone who lost a same-sex partner might feel apprehensive about seeking a grief support group if they're unsure about the group's views on LGBTQ plus identities. Societal challenges, stigma, and discrimination can add an extra layer of complication to the grief process. And this is something we're going to talk a lot more in this presentation, how it can impact an LGBTQ plus individual who is grieving. So now let's go into a deeper dive into the context of grief within the LGBTQ plus community. So what really shapes this section of this presentation is the idea of minority stress, which was a concept developed by an individual named Eileen Meyer. Minority stress refers to unique stressors that individuals from marginalized groups experience as a result of their minority status. This can arise from societal prejudice, discrimination, and stigma, which can contribute to mental health disparities in minority populations. The stress can be both chronic and pervasive throughout a person's life. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific stressor that's time limited, but it can be this general stress that a minority individual has to live with throughout their life in the context in which they live socially and culturally. Minority stress can encompass 4 components. The first being discrimination or violence, experiences of those. The second being expectations of rejection or discrimination, just the idea that it's going to happen or can happen and the stress associated with that. It can also manifest in internalized stigma. So you have all of these messages that exist in our social cultural world that a minority individual starts to internalize and think about and start to believe at some level. It can also manifest in one's concealment of their minority status. So within LGBTQ plus individuals in the community, concealment and disclosure become a very important question of how to navigate the coming out process and the stress that can come from hiding one's authentic self and the protective factors that can also result from hiding to avoid discrimination, to avoid experiences of violence. It can become a very complicated situation that needs to be navigated very thoughtfully, carefully. So as we're looking at discrimination, discrimination can take many forms in the LGBTQ plus community. It can occur in workplaces, it can occur in schools, healthcare settings, families, just to name a few. Discrimination for any minority individual can lead to increased stress, reduced opportunities in the world, lower self-esteem. All of these things can intensify feelings of grief when a loss occurs for an LGBTQ plus individual. The rejection by family members can be particularly devastating, and that can lead to a profound sense of grief and loss even before any physical death occurs. So for any LGBTQ plus individual who's experienced estrangement, rejection from family, from friends, there is already a layer of grief that exists that needs to be considered just very straightforwardly, and when they are dealing with the loss of someone they love, and how that can interact and intensify the grief that they may start to feel. The LGBTQ plus community also faces higher risk of violence and hate crimes, with transgender women of color being particularly vulnerable. Each incident of violence and hate crimes can send a ripple of grief, fear, and trauma throughout the entire LGBTQ plus community. One very poignant example is the Pulse nightclub shooting, and how that was a very frightening experience for any member of the community, and how it just created this intense fear and lack of safety in the world. A place, a nightclub, a bar that was felt like a community space, a home for some, was upended, and so much grief and fear came from that. Individuals may also grieve the loss of safety and peace of mind, as I just mentioned. And this can include grief for those who've been victims of these crimes. This collective grief can be re-traumatized. There can be a re-traumatization with each new incident of violence, and this can create a cyclical pattern of grieving. The grief can never fully be healed. It can never be worked through enough where you can feel like you're okay. With each new hate crime, each new homicide of an LGBTQ plus individual, it reopens that grief. It reopens that loss of safety. Minority stress can also result in isolation and loneliness. For grief, isolation can prevent individuals from reaching out for support. And support is one of the most important interventions for someone who's grieving. We need connection. We need to be able to talk to people, open up to people, receive support from those who matter to us. So due to isolation, we're missing out on one of the most important interventions that a grieving individual can receive. The internalized shame can also impact a grieving person. They may struggle to acknowledge their loss fully and may avoid processing their grief, which can lead to delayed or inhibited mourning. This delay or inhibition to mourn can complicate the grieving process and make it a lot more challenging and lead to mental health issues arising in the future. If an individual who died as a same-sex partner, the grieving person might hide the nature of their relationship when interacting with others who may be unsupportive or discriminatory. And concealing one's identity can cause stress and add to the overall stress of dealing with the loss. To not only be dealing with the loss of a loved one, but to not be able to share what that person meant to you, what the true relationship you had with that individual is a terrible, terrible experience that really disenfranchises the grieving experience, which we'll talk about more in a bit. Any questions or thoughts on that section before we move on to intersectionality? Oh, Mindy, you're muted.
How can we, as practitioners or within our organizations, show the community that we're open to accepting persons from the LGBT community into our groups or into our service?
That's a great question. Let's talk about that now. I have some ideas, but for any organization who does work with the LGBTQ plus community, would you like to share how you do that? How you message, how you demonstrate your support and openness to the LGBTQ plus community?
I can answer.
Sure.
I think it's important to partner with other orgs who like target the LGBTQ community specifically and uplift their work and show your allyship through being open supporters of those orgs that are, doing that particularly. If you don't have anything specifically for LGBTQ youth, there are people who are already doing the work.
Thank you so much. That's an awesome recommendation. It speaks that the power of partnership cannot be understated, that nobody can do this work in a vacuum. And we all offer different services that are all needed, that are all important. And to rely on each other and work with each other makes the work a lot easier and more meaningful. Randy.
Hi. So I'm the program director for LGBTQIA services at Jewish Community Services. So within our program, obviously, the staff have been trained, have done a lot of work in terms of cultural diversity and inclusivity. But I think, this is a mainstream social service agency. So one of the things that we did and that I recommend to everybody is take a look at your forms. If you have intake forms that still say mother, father, she, him, then you need to make your agency or organization welcoming and inclusive with the visual aspects of showing that. Because if somebody in the LGBTQ community walks in, doesn't see any representation in your publications, in your advertising, on the walls, do you have a rainbow flag? Do you have a safe zone sticker? Any of the little things that says, oh, okay, I can come here. This appears to be a welcoming place. So it really starts at the basics. Look at your forms, are they Mr. and Mrs.? Is everything in a binary system that we no longer live in? And I think that's the first way. All of our forms from HR to senior services have, been revised in order to make it welcoming for everyone in the community. And so I think that's the first step. And the other step, and I agree, is the work of partnering with other agencies that do this work, that are boots on the ground, is essential, because sometimes a person may recognize one group, not necessarily your agency, but the affiliations and the partnerships that you carry can have a lot of weight. I hope that is it, answered.
That's a great point. Thank you, Randy. I mean, I love the point about your intake forms, and it's such an important point. And first impressions really do make a difference. That we may not think about the form, and we may overlook that, but it is really a person's first introduction into your organization's services, and it speaks volumes when the form doesn't match a person's identity, when they're forced into boxes, when it could just be a line where they write something, they write their identity. It's a powerful intervention that's so small and has such a meaningful difference. So
it started for me 30 years ago when I went to my primary care physician, and the form said single, married, widowed, divorced. And I went, okay. I drew a box on the form and I checked coupled. And it made them stop and take a look and think, oh, okay. See, the box wasn't even on the form for me. There was no line, there was no place. So I made my own box.
I love it. It's a metaphor for living. Make your own box.
Oh, and I color outside the line, so.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Thank you. Harold.
Yeah, I actually want to agree with a lot of my colleagues on here. I actually have the pleasure to serve for, I'm the new CEO for Safe Schools South Florida. And Safe Schools, along with Randy and other people on this call, is one of the organizations that founded the Alliance for LGBTQ Youth, which is something that it's great because it showcases our partnership, and it's so true what Randy says, that we have to, put all of us out there so that people can identify who we are, because some might identify safe schools, but they don't really know what the Jewish Community Service is doing for LGBTQ folks out there in Miami. So that is a great point, Randy, and thank you for bringing that up. And something that I wanted to add is that one of the first things that I did when I took over this position at Safe Schools was that I made sure that all of our outfacing materials are heavily diverse and include people of all walks of life. One of the things that I make sure whenever I create graphics for the organization is to include an African-American person, a white person, a Hispanic person. Even sometimes I do plus size people. I do people with different disabilities and abilities. And this is important because it shows that you're looking at the wide breadth of the human experience and not just one way of being. And as organizations that serves all of Miami, and Miami is such a diverse place, or South Florida is such a diverse place, that simple thing of making sure that all of your outfacing materials are as diverse as the communities that you serve will make a big difference.
Absolutely. Thank you, Harold. Behnaz.
Hi, I appreciate this discussion. So I'm a pediatric psychology fellow, and here at Jackson Health in Miami, at the systems level, we have established a partnership with Equality Florida that has been doing a wonderful job of providing trainings to employees on providing affirming care. And at the provider or like clinician level, we always make sure to emphasize that we provide affirming care, and we ensure that, we make sure that we assess our patients' SOG and make sure that they're okay if we include that in the documentations.
Thank you, Behnaz. That's great to hear. Lisa?
Hi, thanks. To the point of the forms, I think this might be very helpful in changing things more broadly. The first time I saw what I'll call an inclusive form, I was so excited and so impressed that I decided to thank the doctor's office for having done so, and compliment them for just having that sensitivity. And they were so excited that I thanked them. I said, I'm going to do this every time I see it. And so, I think if we all did it, we would change the world more quickly, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great example. It doesn't have to be necessarily allyship, but it's like a good positive reinforcement. Point out good behaviors, good actions when you see it. Let them know that they're doing something great and support it for the community. So it's small things can make a big difference cumulatively. Jose.
Thank you, Dr. Sheridan, and the Children's Bereavement Center for creating this great venue for us to get together and learn and address, the needs of the LGBTQ plus community. I manage an AmeriCorps group here in Miami. We provide a respite service for caregivers that provide at-home care for their loved ones that are elders, that may have dementia or Alzheimer's. So our volunteers spend from 8 to 22 hours a week throughout the year, offering respite and supervision and companionship. So I've been in the role for a little more over a year, and I started reaching out to the LGBTQ community. So far, I've been able to be in contact with SAGE, which is a group started in New York, and currently they are in South Florida. And participating in an event like this, I welcome anybody here in the group to reach out to me. I'll post my email in case that we can work together to identify elders in the LGBTQ that could be accompanied and visited by a another LGBTQ members of the community that can become part of my group and create that support. We've been able to have so far one member of the LGBTQ that served for a year, and a family, a couple, a married wife and wife that we're trying to match a member to support them. So we're excited to be able to be present in the community and integrate them into our program and our commitment to the community and be part of theirs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. That's an awesome service you provided. Please put your name information in the chat box so people can reach out to you. Anybody else like to share before we move forward? Okay. So working off of Harold's point, we're going to move into intersectionality and grief, and intersectionality is a tremendously important concept to understand for any individual, and how multiple identities can interact with each other and create unique experiences. So intersectionality is a framework for understanding how different aspects of a person's identity, such as their sexuality, gender, race, class, disability status, can interact and overlap with each other. These intersecting identities create overlapping systems of discrimination or disadvantage. So as an example, a person who is Black, transgender, and living in poverty faces a unique set of challenges that cannot be fully understood by looking at any of these identities in isolation. So it really gets to the idea that the whole is greater than sum of the parts. So intersectionality can have a tremendous influence on a person's grief. Anybody who identifies with more than one marginalized group can face additional layers of complexity in their grief. As an example, an LGBTQ+ person of color may have to navigate the grief of losing a partner and the grief related to racial discrimination and violence. This layered grief may involve prejudice from their own community, prejudice from their family, and prejudice from societal institutions. So there's multiple layers of prejudice and discrimination that can manifest. These intersectional identities can also affect resources available to individuals for coping with their grief. Intersectionality can lead to more complex losses as well. So as an example, consider a gay man who's also an immigrant. He might grieve the loss of a partner while also experiencing grief related to displacement or cultural shock. The societal lack of understanding or validation for these losses can make the grief process more challenging. Intersectionality can also result in unique grief experiences. So as an example, a bisexual person with a disability may experience ableism within the LGBTQ+ community or biphobia within the disability community. This can lead to feelings of isolation from both communities and a sense of grieving for acceptance or community in both of these communities. Intersectional identities can sometimes result in limited access to appropriate grief support as well. So as an example, a lower income LGBTQ+ individual may have less access to mental health services as compared to someone who's at a higher income level. These support services may also lack the necessary understanding or training to provide culturally sensitive and inclusive support, leading to inadequate or potentially harmful responses. So that's why it's so wonderful that so many organizations have joined us today to learn more and to share all the great work you are doing for the LGBTQ+ community and how we can all learn to do better work, more inclusive, sensitive work with this community. To go into loss within the LGBTQ+ community further, there are unique aspects of loss that we need to consider. And one of the big ones that I'd like to highlight is the concept of chosen family and the loss of a chosen family member. For those who are not familiar with this term, a chosen family is a group of individuals who are not biologically related, but you provide support, validation, and belongingness. It functions as a family, even though there is no blood relation. Chosen families are very common within the LGBTQ plus community, and they often arise from many experiences of rejection or estrangement from their biological families. So if you can now find a sense of family within your biological family, you've been rejected, you've been estranged, friends, other members of the community come together and support each other. They function as a family, and they love each other as a family should. The grief from the loss of a chosen family member can be deep and profound. It's a devastating loss. Just as much, or if not more, than losing a biological family. It has that same impact. It's very important to keep that in mind if you hear that a chosen family member has passed away. There's other non-traditional forms of loss common in the LGBTQ plus community. One example could be the loss of community spaces, which often serve as safe havens from societal prejudice and discrimination. One example could be bars and social spaces for LGBTQ plus adults. Miami, for example, there used to be so many gay bars, gay nightclubs, that they have disappeared. There's only a very small handful. So there are not as many social spaces for interaction and community as there once was. There can also be a loss of identity or sense of self that a person might experience. So one example could be a transgender person who might grieve the loss of their pre-transition life. There could be a loss of many privileges that they once had that they no longer have, which can bring on feelings of grief. A very important concept is disenfranchised grief, which we're going to spend some time with. Disenfranchised grief is a loss that cannot be openly acknowledged, publicly mourned, or socially supported. Disenfranchised grief presents in relationships that are unrecognized by family or friends, or kept private by the grieving individual. Disenfranchised grief can happen in many ways. For this particular presentation, we're going to focus on disenfranchised grief within the LGBTQ plus community, but you can also find disenfranchised grief with the death of an online friend or a pen pal, people who don't know about your relationship with this person. It could be the death of an ex-partner. People might find it hard to understand, why are you grieving the death of your ex-partner? They have a hard time wrapping their head around it. It could also be the death of someone you never knew, such as an unknown sibling or an absent parent. Disenfranchised grief can also present in non-death losses. So it doesn't have to be the loss due to death where you can find disenfranchised grief. For non-death losses, that can include an adoption that doesn't go through, a loved one who's dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, the loss of one's home country, the loss of safety, or the loss of mobility or health can all be disenfranchised grieving experiences. And given that disenfranchised grief is not fully acknowledged or supported, it can result in complicated grieving symptoms. So when a loss is not given the attention, the acknowledgement that it deserves and needs, the person's whole experience of grief gets lost. It doesn't get fully processed. And when that happens, it can arise in maladaptive coping strategies, such as substance misuse, substance abuse, a lot of numbing behaviors. There may also be mental health symptoms, such as anxiety or depression, diminished self-esteem, and a sense of shame, perhaps, about the grief and loss you're dealing with. For members of the LGBTQ plus community, disenfranchised grief can be prevalent because of social stigma and discrimination. Individuals may fear discrimination and shame in receiving bereavement support for their loss. They may also find that their relationship to the deceased has been deemed illegitimate by either legal authorities, medical professionals, friends, their own family, or the family of their deceased. There's many ways that an LGBTQ plus person may feel like their loss is not taken seriously. It's not given the same amount of respect as someone who identifies as heterosexual or cisgender. For some LGBTQ plus individuals, family members may not accept their sexual identity or accept their relationship, which can lead to disenfranchised grief. These individuals may also be excluded from family mourning practices, reducing social support. So they might not be invited to the funeral. If your spouse passed away, the spouse's family, if they were unsupportive, might not invite you to the wake, to the Shiva, to the service, memorial service, which is a horrifying loss that does unfortunately happen. Some LGBTQ plus individuals may not be out about their sexual identity, which can further contribute to a lack of social support. If you're not out, it can be very hard, very challenging to say that person you were dating, the person you were in a relationship with, that you loved very deeply, passed away. LGBTQ plus individuals also can contend with a lack of religious or spiritual support, a healthy outlet to find meaning, to find understanding from this dimension, which can be very challenging, be very painful. For many LGBTQ plus individuals, there are experiences, painful experiences with church and religion. Not all religions, not all denominations are rejecting of LGBTQ plus identities, but some may have grown up in those types of religions where they already received very negative, rejecting messages. Any questions or thoughts on those sections before we move to mental health or coping? All right. So moving on to mental health. So the LGBTQ plus community faces increased rates of mental health issues as compared to the general population. This heightened risk is due to various stressors, which can include societal prejudice, discrimination, and marginalization. So we're going back to the minority stress concept and how it can lead to mental health disparities within the LGBTQ plus community. Some disparities include depression and anxiety. So LGBTQ plus individuals are almost 3 times more likely to experience a mental health condition, such as depression or anxiety. And this can often be due to discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, and rejection from family and friends. There's also higher prevalence rates of PTSD within the LGBTQ plus community. And this can often result from violence, bullying, and traumatic experiences related to one's sexual orientation and gender identity. LGBTQ plus individuals, particularly transgender and bisexual individuals, have been found to have significantly higher rates of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. This is due to family rejection, bullying, or internalized homophobia, biphobia, transphobia that can exacerbate feelings of hopelessness and despair. There is also a higher risk of substance use disorders, which can be a coping mechanism for dealing with the stress and trauma associated with discrimination and stigma. These mental health considerations that we've talked about can lead to something called a complicated grieving process. And complicated grief is a condition where an individual's response to loss is prolonged and can significantly impair their ability to function in daily life. So it's a grieving that does not get better over time. It's a grieving that gets worse over time. It really diminishes a person's capacity to live in the world again. For LGBTQ plus members, unique factors can contribute to complicated grief. The first being disenfranchised grief, which we talked about. Having a lack of validation and societal support can intensify feelings of grief and hinder the mourning process, which can lead to complicated grief. Minority stress, which we talked about, experiences of discrimination, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, societal rejection can intensify feelings of grief and make it difficult for someone to cope with the loss. Intersectionality can also contribute to complicated grief. So if an individual identifies with more than one marginalized group, they may face multiple layers of discrimination and marginalization, which can amplify the effects of grief. We have to consider also the concealment of one's identity or the concealment of their relationship with someone. If someone is not open about their identity or relationship to the deceased, they may be unable to openly express their grief or seek support. And we also have to consider limited access to supportive care. So any lack of access to affirming and supportive services can also prohibit necessary care and lead to complicated grief. So a lot of the things we've already talked about come together into providing a lot of insight as to how complicated grieving can manifest, and really speaks to the risk factors that LGBTQ plus individuals face when they're grieving. That if they're not receiving the adequate support that's needed, they're dealing with minority stress, disenfranchised experiences of grieving, they can have a really, really difficult time with the loss. So we have to consider the role of coping. So having healthy, adaptive coping mechanisms can make a huge difference in how someone grieves and how their grief evolves over time. Everyone has different coping mechanisms. So it's very important to take an individualized approach to this and help a person identify healthy coping strategies that work for them. But there are some that are just important to keep in mind for anyone. So we always want to help someone seek support from those who validate your loss. So we want to find validating individuals, connection with friends or family, perhaps, who knew about the relationship with the person who died and can listen empathically without minimizing or denying your feelings. So you cannot underestimate the role of a good, supportive, empathic listener. When someone's grieving, having someone who can be there with you, listen, hear what you're going through, not try to fix it, not try to change it, but just be there in your grief is a powerfully transformative experience. It's really hard to be with someone who's grieving. There's an intensity of feelings. You start to feel uncomfortable, you not know what to do. But if you can just be there with them, listen to them, take it all in with them, it's a gift that you give them. So just keep that in mind for anyone who's grieving. We can also help someone create memory books or digital memories to have something a little bit more tangible, an activity they can do to help them with their loss. So that can involve creating a physical memory book, digital memory album on their computer or online, or creating a memorial website, which can include photos, stories, and messages from friends and loved ones. So having a living document, a living thing that people can return to, add over time, can be really supportive, really helpful as time goes on, as anniversaries, as major life milestones develop, that we can return to this and honor, remember someone's loved one. I see a hand from Anika. Anika, do you have a question? You're muted. I don't know if you're trying to say something. Okay, we'll move on. Just let us know, Anika. You can also help someone create their own mourning ritual. So for people who are unable to participate in traditional mourning rituals with friends and family due to unacknowledged or unaccepted loss, let's say that they weren't allowed to attend a church service, synagogue. They were told they're not welcome to their loved one's service. You can create your own. You can create your own mourning ritual, which can provide a very healing grieving experience. This can happen in so many ways, and it can be really useful to follow the individual, engage them in a discussion, exploration process of what that could look like. But a small thing could be writing a letter to say goodbye, working with them on that, having them read it to you, read it to those who matter to them. An idea that I really like is hosting a dinner party where people bring your loved one's favorite foods. So it could be potluck style, and it can be an opportunity for community connection while eating your loved one's favorite dishes. You can also create your own memorial service in a place that holds significance to you and your loved one. So it doesn't have to be a place of worship. It doesn't have to be a church or temple. You could do it on the beach. You could do it wherever you want, a place that has special meaning to you. It could be the restaurant where you had your first date together, whatever. But you can be creative, and it can be an opportunity to engage someone who's grieving in a thoughtful, creative exercise that helps them to create a sense of meaning in their loss, surrounded by people who support them, who supported the loved one who died, who loved them. This really gets to the idea of your chosen family and including them in your own memorial service. You can also engage in community service or activism. So participating in a community service project or advocacy work that aligns with their loved one's passions or values can be a living memorial to their spirit. So if your loved one was passionate about LGBTQ plus rights, they might volunteer at an LGBTQ plus community center or advocacy. So to give back to the community, doing something that their loved one liked to do that mattered to them. So it keeps their spirit, it keeps their passion alive through you. You can also engage in artistic expression. So our art, music, dance, painting, poetry, so many forms of art that can offer a therapeutic outlet for expressing grief and can give form to the many complex emotions surrounding loss. In our grief support groups at the CVC, we do offer music and art therapists, and it's such a unique, wonderful experience to express and process your grief in these art forms, in addition to just the spoken word and connection that can come from opening up, sharing about your loss. There's also professional help. Therapists or counselors who are experienced with LGBTQ plus issues can guide the bereaved person through this process, help them find their own sense of personal meaning in this loss, and navigate their grief in a validating and supportive environment. And we also have grief support groups. Those can provide a space to share experiences and feelings with others who understand the unique challenges of grief. You're not alone. People are going through similar things at different points in their grief. So it's an opportunity to connect, an opportunity to learn and understand that what you're going through is very normal. It's your own experience, but many people can understand what you're going through. It's validating, it's empowering, and it's a great way to receive help in a supportive community. Any thoughts or questions about that, or any other coping strategies you can think of or you've offered to a person who's grieving, or in your own personal experience that you think would be helpful to share?
I have a question. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what if like I have a friend and who lost the mother, and what if the pictures, I know you were suggesting, I guess what was it called, a memorial, or having, but what if just having her picture up like triggers, and it's, you know, they're still grieving, so maybe they can't really have those letters or those the dress or the, you know, just certain things around. I don't know what else to suggest.
That's such a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it speaks to the individualized approach. You know, these are some nice ideas, but you have to take it on a person-to-person basis. And for some people, particularly in the earlier parts of the loss, the earlier times of grief, it can be really painful to go through memories, to look at pictures, to look at videos. So you want to talk to that person about that. And maybe for the time being, they have to put the pictures away. There's just too much grief already, that to see their face, to hear their voice.
They felt really guilty to put the picture away.
Right. But
But
that's where
they came up with the suggestion themselves, but I didn't want to be the one to say, yeah, put your mother's picture away. Like that would sound so mean. You
no,
know?
yeah, yeah. No, this is a great example because if someone's feeling guilty about that, you can say, listen, like, I understand you feel guilty, but you're going through so much pain. There's so much sadness right now. And I I would certainly understand if you need to put the picture away for now. I think many people would get it. Um, we're here to support you. And if that's what you need at that moment, nobody's judging. Nobody's here to tell you you're doing something wrong. And that person, whoever it is, they have the freedom, they have the flexibility to bring it back when they feel ready. And maybe they can put it out for an hour, or maybe they need 5 minutes to look at it. But to have it on the wall, staring at them, it can feel too much for now. But to let them know that grief takes time, and this is where you're at right now, and that's okay. And maybe down the line in the future, you'll feel ready to put it back up, or maybe you'll want to do something different with it. But to let everyone know that this is where you're at right now, it's all good. This is very normal. This is okay. And whatever you need, I want to be here to help you in your grief, not to judge you. Freddie, your hand's up.
Hi, Dr. Sheridan. I just wanted to say my name is Freddie, and my partner of 5 years committed suicide.
Mm.
And I can say that my experience with the Children's Bereavement Center was that I never felt at any point, not only through the group, the people who were facilitating the group, but either I didn't feel it either with other members, that my grief was any different or invalid because my partner was male. And also I sought out help through the Florida Institute for Suicide Prevention, and I didn't feel that there either. So you guys are doing a good job. You did it right, and I can say that I'm better and I'm healing. I did make a little like memorial type thing when my partner's birthday was coming up. I made a YouTube video compiling all the videos of all our crazy adventures and all the stupid things we had done together. And it was definitely healing. Because of the way he had passed away, I wanted everybody to see him happy and to see that he had been, he had happiness in his life before his struggle with addiction made him give up. And so, that did help in my situation.
Thank you, Freddie. Thank you for sharing your story. That means a lot to us. I'm glad we were able to support you. Harold? Harold, did you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry, I was on mute. That I actually want to, thank Freddie for sharing what he shared and really affirm what the CBC does, because, touching back to the different religious organizations that exist, not every, at least particularly on my end, not every church that says they're open and welcoming are open and welcoming towards the queer community. There's a lot of bait and switching that happens in many churches, that they say all are welcome except when you come out, and then it's like, well, all are welcome except someone like you, and then you have to go through all these different things that they want you to do. But having a organization like the Children's Bereavement Center, where people can come and grieve in a way that is not I don't want to say religious, but it's not a religious way of grieving. There's no answer. There's just, they're just giving us space to grieve. That's very important, because a lot of times, and this is particularly in my experience with Hispanic and African American congregations, there tends to be a need for a quick heal, or a prayer will solve everything. Just give your prayers to God, let God solve it, let God be the one to take away your grief. And at times that's not very helpful, and I mean, it's not very helpful, period. So I really want to encourage people to, if someone has lost someone in their lives, encourage them to come to places like the Children's Bereavement Center, because I have been personally impacted by it, because I've been a part of this group for a long time. And I know that they'll do a great job in the way that they allow people to just grieve and take their own journey through it. So I just want to affirm everything you all are doing.
Yeah, and had it not been for the group, I can tell you that I probably would have committed suicide as well, because I wanted to be with him.
Yeah.
And I saw how easy it was for him to do it, because I was the one who had found him hanging in our house. And so it was a very easy option. And had it not been for the groups, and I can tell you, my family, I have over 100 family members in Miami. And always growing up, we were always told, blood is thicker than water, family's there for you when you really need them, your friends won't be there. When my partner died, my family still today has not come see me, see if I'm okay. And my friends did. And my friends were here, they would get me out of bed, they would bring me food, and make sure I was out of the house many times. And so I definitely felt that disenfranchised aspect that you were talking about from my family. And so the groups, as well as support from friends, having been a gay person abandoned by his family, and when I needed them the most, it made a big difference.
Yeah, that's where the term that Dr. Sheridan, you mentioned, chosen family, really comes into play, because in the queer community, our chosen families are at times more important than our actual families, especially when we are disenfranchised. And I also speak from a place that I have been disenfranchised my own family. If it wasn't for those people in my life that have become my chosen family, I would be in a very dark place as well. So thanks for sharing, Freddie. That's really, really important.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Anybody else like to share? Okay. So moving on to the role of community support in LGBTQ plus grief. We cannot understate the importance of community. It plays a pivotal role in the grieving process for anyone, as especially for members of the LGBTQ plus community. The concept of chosen family exemplifies the importance of community support, as shared by both Freddie and Harold. In the face of loss, chosen family can provide emotional support, practical assistance, and a safe space to express grief. So as an example, consider an individual who loses a close friend from their chosen family. While their biological family members might not understand the depth of loss, the individual's chosen family can acknowledge the significance of this loss and provide much needed support and validation. There's also LGBTQ plus friendly support. So support groups, community centers, mental health professionals who are knowledgeable and sensitive about LGBTQ plus experiences can be instrumental in the grieving process. Support groups offer a space for individuals to share their experiences, express their feelings, find shared understandings. Support groups can also help individuals feel less isolated in their grief and provide practical strategies for coping. Community centers can provide resources, safe spaces, and opportunities for connection and support. These can be very important when grieving, as they provide stability and a sense of belongingness. Mental health professionals can provide culturally competent care that respects and validates LGBTQ plus identities. They can help individuals navigate their grief without fear of judgment, discrimination, or misunderstanding. For allies, or for any of our allies in the room, allies play a crucial role in validating and supporting grieving individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. You all are very important. You can create bridges of understanding and empathy, can challenge societal norms that can contribute to disenfranchised grief. As an ally, one of the first and most fundamental steps is to listen and validate the experiences of LGBTQ plus individuals. So if you're an ally and you're not really sure how to begin, be a good listener, be a validating, supportive listener. So that can involve acknowledging unique challenges and grief experiences, such as the loss of chosen family members, experiences of discrimination that a person's going through, or any of the minority stressors we discussed. Allies can also engage in advocacy. So allies can leverage their privilege to challenge discrimination, to advocate for policy change, and to create more inclusive spaces in society. So as an example, an ally can support a grieving friend who lost a partner by acknowledging the depth of their loss, offering emotional support, and standing up against any discriminatory remarks or behaviors they encounter along the way. We can also create safe spaces. So safe spaces are environments in which individuals feel respected, validated, and free to express themselves without fear of judgment or discrimination. In order to create these environments, it's important to encourage openness, to validate unique experiences, and challenge discrimination as it arises. This can be achieved by setting guidelines for respect. So having some group rules, having space rules around inclusion, taking a zero tolerance stance towards discriminatory or disrespectful behaviors. And for grief, safe spaces can offer individuals a supportive environment where they can share their feelings and experiences and receive understanding and support in return. We can also tailor our grief resources, as we discussed in the beginning of this presentation. This can include support groups, counseling services, literature, online resources, and more. These resources should acknowledge and validate the unique grief experiences of the LGBTQ+ community, as we discussed today. They should also provide practical strategies for navigating these experiences and information about other available support. This is why it's so great to have a mixture of organizations in this Zoom room together, where we get to know each other and the services we provide. By providing these resources, it shows recognition and understanding of the unique challenges that LGBTQ+ individuals face, and it can make grieving feel a lot less isolating. So in the interest of time, I don't think we're going to have time for these case examples, but does anyone have any questions, thoughts, things we didn't discuss that you'd like to cover today before I share a little bit more about the Bereavement Center and the services we provide? Amber, welcome.
Hello, folks. I came in a little late, but of what I've taken in so far, I think I come from a different perspective. So my family owns a funeral home, and so I grew up kind of in that space, and I've seen grief look a lot of different ways, and I've seen a lot of times people who are not necessarily being accepted by family being allowed in those spaces, or even given their own support to grieve a person. So I think this information for sure would be even something beneficial to share with my family, to know how to support people that they encounter who aren't being necessarily welcome and supported in spaces when a family may overall not be keen on a person. And so thank you just for this information. It's really insightful.
Thank you, Amber. And while I have you, do you want to share a little bit about the Alliance and what you all do in the community?
Sure, I can do that now. I was going to share my screen, if that's okay with you.
Oh, sure. Here, let me stop my sharing. I need to make you a host.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I think I muted you.
Yes, but I unmuted myself.
My bad.
Okay. I think I can share it. All right. So I'm going to go into presentation mode. We're going to go way to the beginning. Hi, folks. My name is Amber Manker. I'm the clinical manager at the Alliance for LGBTQ Youth, and I just wanted to take some time to go over our services, who we are, and how we support youth throughout the county. So the Alliance for LGBTQ Youth is an agency that works specifically with queer youth, and the Q in our LGBTQ can be for queer or questioning youth. And the youth have to reside in Miami-Dade County. They have to be 18 years or younger, but if they are in a special degree program or alternative, engaged in foster care, we can work with them up until the age of 24. And so we always tell folks if they're not sure if a person qualifies to just submit the referral anyway. We offer primarily 5 services. The first one is care coordination, and care coordination, I would say, is a little different from case management because it allows for a person to create the goals for themselves and then work collaboratively with a care coordinator to assist the goals. So typically in case management, it might look like, here's a goal, do this thing, come back, report back, and we'll go from there. Whereas like care coordination might look like, oh, I want to, interested in getting connected to an individual counselor. Okay, so have you ever engaged in counseling before? Would you like to come up with some questions together to ask the person you're interested in meeting with for consultation? And so we really try to like work through and connect them to resources in the community to achieve their goals. We have individual counseling, which is one-to-one and takes place weekly. Most of our clinicians are trained in CBT, along with a few of us are trained in DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and then trauma-focused CBT. Group counseling, which will be starting soon on July 12th. It's this LGBTQ specific CBT model, which focuses on internalized feelings folks might develop about themselves because of their gender and sexuality. We also offer family support, and we'll be offering family individual counseling soon. And then finally, we have Change Makers, which is a leadership and advocacy program that youth come together to identify a topic that they're passionate about, and they collaborate to create a service project essentially. So this year, they're focusing a lot on literacy and the banned books for youth, and like how to create access for youth who we are seeing like being parsed out of education, to get them reconnected to themselves and allow them the ability to see themselves in literature. So to refer to our agency, you can go to our website, which is allforlgbtqyouth.org. There's a referral that says make a referral. Once you click that button, it'll take you to our web-based referral form, which is a slight, this is a screenshot of what that looks like. Some important things to know when you're filling out our referral is that it can be basically filled out by anyone. Our services do require consent, so if the person is under the age of 18, they will need guardian parental caretaker consent. And then critical information to include, there's a section that says SOGI concerned, which stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And there'll be any information that you could share with us that would make it safe for us not to potentially out that you. So we know folks have like different varying levels of outness. So a SOGI concern can look like, maybe my mom knows about my sexuality, but does not have insight around my gender identity. And so when like speaking with my caregiver, please use these pronouns versus these pronouns. It could be parents, one parent knows gender, the other parent knows sexuality, so whatever helps us navigate. Contact restrictions, so if they would prefer email only, we can do that. And then your contact information as a referral source, and the best way to contact the youth, sometimes they will say email, but I would encourage you to ask how often they check their email or engage with their email. And so this is a flyer for our group therapy that will be starting on July 12th. It is a 4-week program. We meet twice a week, going over different topics. It is a closed group, so once the group starts on July 12th, that is like the cohort that moves through the programming. And you can use this QR code to sign up, or you can go to our Instagram, which I shared on the final slide, which is my email address, and here is our Instagram account. So that's pretty much it. Any questions?
It's not so much of a question, Amber, but I just want to
Mhm.
say thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
We love working with you all, and you guys are always sharing our stuff, and we're sharing your stuff. So thank you for being such a collaborative partner with us online.
Thank you. We appreciate you all as well. Okay, I'm gonna make you the host. I mean, I think you're the host already. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stop sharing.
All right. Thank you, Amber. Thank you to the
Thank you.
Alliance for all the awesome work you do for the youth in Miami-Dade.
Thank you.
Any questions for me about the presentation? Anything anyone would like more information about before I talk about our grief support services? Righty. So really quickly, I just let you all know about the CBC if you're not familiar with us and the information, the services we provide. All right, so our groups are free of cost. There's no cost to attend our groups, and we start as young as 4 years old. They're open to anyone who's lost a loved one as a result of illness, accident, suicide, homicide. It is a loss related to death for our groups. Our groups are available for children and teens. They are age appropriate, so we have elementary school groups, groups from kindergarten to 2nd grade and 3rd to 5th grade. We have middle school groups and high school groups. We also have adult groups. We have young adults, adults in English and Spanish, a dedicated child loss group, and a dedicated perinatal and infant loss group in both English and Spanish. Our groups are co-facilitated by both a mental health professional and a trained volunteer. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we do include music and art therapy exercises in our groups, and 3 times a year we also hold candlelight ceremonies. Very importantly, our groups are support groups. They're not group therapy. So what we do is therapeutic, but it is not a therapy experience, it is a support experience. Our groups meet at the same time each week, same day as well. So we try to be as consistent and predictable as possible. We run on a 12-month calendar, so we meet 12 months throughout the year, and we do not have a curriculum. So people can start the group talking about whatever it is going on in their life that day, that week, and we follow the conversation. We don't tell you what we're going to talk about. Our groups occur online through Zoom. As I said, it's free to participate, no cost, and there's also no wait list to join. We get you in that night if a group is available or that week. We do encourage and recommend the whole family to participate in our grief support groups. As I said, they're all age appropriate, but the whole family can participate in the grief support group experience. It doesn't matter when the loss occurred. It could be 5 days or 5 years ago. And there are no session limits. You can come as long as you'd like. You can stop and take a break and come back a year or 2 later if you feel like you need the support at that time in your life. Our groups are also inclusive. We welcome all of those who are touched by the loss of a loved one. So it doesn't have to be a family member who died. It could be a friend, it could be a teacher, it could be a neighbor. If you're grieving because someone in your life has died, you're welcome into our groups. Our groups are also non-denominational, culturally diverse, and we welcome all identities. How to register for a group, it's a 3-step process. We try to keep it quick and easy. First step is you can either call our 888 number or visit our website where you can fill out a form for registration, or you can email us at support@childbereavement.org. After one of these 3 components of the first step happen, you will be in touch with an intake staff member, which is a quick call to get some more additional information about you, about your loss. We figure out scheduling the night that works for you and your family. And then after that, you can join your group after the intake process is complete. There is no referral required. You don't need a doctor's note, therapist note. You can self-enroll whenever you're ready. All you have to do is call our 888 number or email us at support@childbereavement.org or fill out a form on our website. So that concludes today's Lunch and Learn presentation on LGBTQ+ grief. If you're interested in following us on social media, our handle is at Miami CBC.
That's something that can be done by the quality learning process.
Mindy, go ahead.
Fabulous presentation. I thought maybe you might just mention about our training programs, which would be relevant to so many people who are online.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you all go to our website, childbereavement.org, you can sign up for our newsletter where you'll get updates on future trainings that are offered to the community. But we train a number, thousands of professionals each year on topics related to grief and loss. So Lunch and Learns are one avenue in which we provide trainings. We also provide conversations with the CBC, which often occur in the evening. They're shorter presentations on specific topics. We also provide live trainings through Zoom for any organizations looking to get more experience in grief support and how to support a grieving individual. And we also have recently launched home study trainings. So these are pre-recorded trainings that cover various topics related to grief and loss that you can complete at your own pace and provide the same experience as a live training, but you can do it on your own schedule. So if anybody has questions about that, they can email us either at info@childbereavement.org. You're welcome to email me. My email is daniel@childbereavement.org. And on this Zoom, we also have our program director, Julissa. Julissa, if you want to say a quick hello, who would also be available if you have any questions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julissa. Thank you for the great presentation, Daniel. I will also add my information in the chat, my contact information in the chat. You can reach out to me if needed.
Thanks, Julissa. And finally, there's just a survey if you all are able to complete this. I'm going to copy it in the chat so you have it. And I'll also email you all in case you're unable to do it right now. But this is just our survey about your experience. We're always looking for new topics. So if anybody has an interest in a topic that you'd like more information about, please feel free to include that in the survey as well. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? Okay, I just put the survey in the chat. If you're all able to click on that, just fill it out whenever you have time. That would be wonderful. But thank you again for everyone who took the time to attend our Lunch and Learn today. We really value your participation. For those who shared, it meant a great deal to us to share your stories, to share your questions and experiences. Please know we're always here for you. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining.